Hello there and welcome to No Nonsense Metal Reviews with me, George. And this is a new idea of mine, a completely different show, one that I haven't explored yet. This is underrated albums overshadowed by a band's bigger successes. A bit of a working title, but an idea that came to mind a little while ago where I thought, actually, it's quite a common trend that a band has great albums that are really only appreciated by the deeper, more dedicated fans. So, of course, there's going to be a fan base for all of these albums, but there's those ones that I really believe, and a lot of people do agree, deserve a little bit more love and certainly a lot more attention. So I've got 3 albums here by very well-known acts, in my opinion. The list, when I started making this, was very minimal, and within minutes or within a few days, it exponentially grew, and now there is double pages, huge lists of albums and bands that there's moments here where I think these albums need far more appreciation. Or this band, yeah, actually they had a few albums there that just get totally forgotten about, and unjustly. So the idea is established, and we're going to start off with none other than the founding fathers of heavy metal. Of course, talking about the mighty Black Sabbath. Now you might be thinking, Black Sabbath? Underappreciated albums? Underrated albums? What? Is that even a thing? Yes, it is. Black Sabbath, of course. They had such a classic era with Ozzy in the early days, from the self-titled right the way through until Never Say Die. Although, in my opinion, Never Say Die, Technical Ecstasy, you could probably do without. So let's say up until Sabotage, you've got some fantastic material there, absolutely golden material. Some of the defining albums of heavy metal, and unanimously loved across the board. This album came significantly later. This was in 2013, the album Black Sabbath 13. I think that this album does not get nearly enough appreciation and love. Now you may think, Black Sabbath, I mean, come on, you could talk about all the Tony Martin albums, or the album with Glenn Hughes, of course. What about Born Again with Ian Gillan? Those albums, I feel, are appreciated in context, whereas we talk about Ozzy's career with Black Sabbath, this album doesn't really feature a lot. And you may disagree, and that's absolutely fine, because that's the lovely inclusive thing about being a heavy music fan, that we discuss this stuff. We all have our own opinions. This is my opinion, that this album is underrated. Because there was such a massive gap. What was it? About 35 years? Off the top of my head? I'm not quite sure. But such a huge gap between Never Say Die and this album. Of course, so much happened in the meantime. It's easy to sort of pass this one by. Certainly when you look at the likes of the self-titled, Paranoid, Masters of Reality, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, even onto the Dio stuff, of course. Are you really going to go straight to this one? But I frequently do, bizarrely enough. And I think there are some killer tracks here. Just looking at this is almost a little bit too damaged for my liking. But I think it probably came like that. I keep everything in very good condition. But looking at these tracks here, there are some absolute stormers. Really great tracks. End of the Beginning kicks off the album, a really good doomy piece. This album is produced by the legendary Rick Rubin, and it really shows because it's very polished, although it's Geezer, Tony and Ozzy, the originals, without Bill Ward, sadly. it does sound very clean, and it is distinctly very different from where they left off with Ozzy. Absolutely, but of course it's going to. But as I say, End of the Beginning, absolutely great track. Very heavy, very doomy. God is Dead, Turn Up the Doom, really great number. Almost a bit of a Candlemass flair at times, bizarrely. Loner, an absolute rockin' heavy metal stomper. One of my favourite tracks on the album. Zeitgeist could definitely bring you to tears if you were in that emotional state. A really beautiful piece. And I honestly do think that the last 4 tracks, the succession of Age of Reason, Live Forever, Damaged Soul, and Dear Father, are absolutely superb. They're all very heavy songs. Certainly the last one, Dear Father, is a very dark, very moody piece with a storm and a bell. Of course, it's almost like capping it off where they started with the first album, the self-titled, with the legendary storm and bell toll sound, capped off at the end of this album with a storm, with a rainstorm and a tolling bell. Just great, really heavy stuff, and I just do not feel that this album is given enough love and appreciation. I'm sure it was a big success, but these songs are fantastic. I have a lot of time and a lot of love for this album. My first choice of an album that I think is underappreciated. If you're a Sabbath fan, which of course you will be, because everybody in the heavy music fandom is, this is an album that you've absolutely got to check out. It's a great album. You will not regret it. So, moving on, we're going to go extreme now. We're going to go to the extreme metal world. We're going to go to England's grindcore kings, the mighty defining pioneers that are Napalm Death. What a parallel that is, Black Sabbath to Napalm Death. Well, this album, The Killer Order of the Leech, is an absolutely roaring, smashing moment. And I think this is probably my favourite Napalm Death album. It's overshadowed because, of course, in the early era of the band, with Scum or From Enslavement to Obliteration, you had some grindcore defining moments. They were the pioneering albums. We all know them. They get a lot of love and a lot of appreciation. The first few albums with Mark Greenway, Barney Greenway, Utopia Banished, Harmony Corruption was first, rather. These albums are heralded as being the sort of crossover, shall we say, between grindcore and death metal. Really defining moments, really good albums, very heavy. But that's all big, well-known stuff. And in latter years, of course, we have, let's say, from Apex Predator or Utilitarian, and then the latest album and EP, subsequent EP, have been met with great acclaim. People absolutely love them. They're very different, it's very heavy stuff, very good albums. There's a chunk of the band's catalogue, in my opinion, which is left a little bit unattended to. Doesn't get nearly as much love as it deserves. And this album is the one that I think deserves a whole lot more love and appreciation. I think this is a superb album. Continuing War on Stupidity, The Icing on the Hate, Forced to Fear. This is just one barbaric, grinding death metal track after another. This is such an absolute stormer. There is not a bad track on the album. The closing track there, The Great Capitulator, has an annoyingly lengthy silence in it before an unnecessary outro, and I think that I've probably turned the album off after track 11, Blows to the Body. Most of the time I do listen to this because I don't need to sit there waiting for 5 minutes to hear a little outro, interlude piece, whatever. But this is an absolute rager. really fantastic stuff. I would say this is one of the best Napalm Death albums, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. I think this is an absolute stormer. Fans of the extreme, check this album out if you haven't. This is the band on ripping top form. Absolutely love it. And rightly, I think it deserves a whole lot more attention and love. So that's my second recommendation of an album that you need to hear because it is way too underrated. So we're going to go with a slightly more well-known name here. We are going to go with the groove thrash metal legends, the household name that is the mighty Pantera, from this lovely little box set, which is of course false. The complete studio albums is not the truth. We get the 5 albums that everyone knows about, everyone goes to, excluding the first 4 with a bit of a up and down lineup and a slightly different style to what we get here. Everyone knows Cowboys from Hell, the classic debut of this era. Vulgar display of power. Far Beyond Driven. Not a lot of people talk about this album. Pantera, Reinventing the Steel, and this is an absolute blinder. It's one of my favourite, I'm not going to say it's my favourite Pantera album, definitely not, but I think all the other albums of this box set, including The Great Southern Trendkill, get a lot more love and appreciation, whereas this album just, it seems to slip through the net wrongly. Hellbound, Goddamn Electric, Revolution Is My Name. Death Rattle is one of the heaviest Pantera songs that there is, 100%. We'll grind that axe for a long time. Uplift, I'll Cast a Shadow. These are heavy. I'm not going to say it's outright thrash, because I think that what happens here on Reinventing the Steel is that Phil Anselmo's time in Down has infused into the groovy thrash nature of Pantera from the first 3 albums, certainly, and you almost get this almost sludgy, thrashy kind of hybrid, and they sound totally different here to what they do on any of the 4 albums before that. But it's an absolute rager. This is a fantastic album that I think any Pantera fan needs to check out, absolutely. But any fan of Down, or just if there's any thrashers out there that haven't heard this, there are some absolutely ripping Dimebag Darrell moments here. This is an album that deserves a whole lot more love and appreciation, because I think that this album stands up very well against any of those previous 4 albums. I think this is a very solid release indeed. So these are my 3 for this particular episode of albums that are underrated because they're overshadowed by the bigger successes. This is Pantera, their Death Throes, on top form though, absolutely top form. So there you have it. I'll be working on my next 3 recommendations, of course, but what do you think about these 3 albums? Are you a fan? Do you think I'm totally off? Do you also think they're underrated? Let me know. I'm interested to know. Thank you for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe, of course, and check back soon for more recommendations and more issues of underrated albums overshadowed by bigger successes. Thank you for watching. Stay heavy.